This episode is brought to you by the Pelora Group.
Welcome back to Winning Through Culture.
I'm Tim Flanagan.
And I'm Amanda Kramer.
When culture's not a priority, people aren't a priority. Having an intentional focus helps you as a leader remain impactful and relevant as you move your business forward.
Welcome to Winning Through Culture. Well, welcome back to another episode of Winning Through Culture. Tim and I are really excited today to have Nicole Cramer with us. Nicole is a sales conversation coach. She's a keynote speaker, and she is an Exactly What to Say certified guide. And we recently had the opportunity to engage with her in a professional setting and really felt like having her on the podcast and having a conversation about sales psychology would really benefit those that are listening along. So today's conversation is going to be all about that connection, sales psychology, and leadership, and how those three things come together to ultimately help you as a leader, business owner, entrepreneur, build the best culture that you possibly can. So, Nicole, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. So we can hop right in. And Tim, I think you had a couple of hot topic questions you wanted to kick us off with.
Yeah, well, first off, Nicole, thanks for being with us. And we've enjoyed getting to know you and doing some work with you. And this topic of culture, and specifically kind of a high performance culture that leans into understanding sales psychology, human behavior. I'm kind of curious, before we get started on that topic, Nicole, how did you get interested in this field? What kind of led you into the field of sales psychology and coaching?
You know, it's interesting because I was selling before I realized I was selling. And I now understand that we're all in the business of selling something, regardless of what we actually professionally do. And I learned that by going on my first sales interview. And I had no experience. I just had been a 15-year high school math teacher. So I'm walking into this sales interview thinking, oh my gosh, what if he asks me about my experience? Well, he did. And at the end, he said, listen, you did a really great job. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised. But I'm going to have a hard time hiring you over the 89 internal people who want this position. Your resume just says teacher, you've never sold anything. And I stopped because right in that moment, I was like, oh, it hit me where it hurts. I said, well, I've been selling math to high school teenagers for the last 15 years and nobody wanted to buy that.
So true. So true.
So true, right? I mean, those high school teenagers were not walking into that classroom trying to buy math. And when I said it, it just kind of came out. And in that moment, he goes, wow, that was good. That was good. Will you go on a ride along with one of my guys? And I was like, yeah. He's like, will you do a 30, 60, 90-day business plan? I was like, absolutely. And I walk out of there and I called my friend. I'm like, I don't even know what a 30, 60, 90-day business plan is, but I think I'm on to the next round. And so it was exciting in that moment because it did move me on to the next round. But what I've never forgotten that I felt in that moment is sales is not transactional, it's relational. And I had to walk into that classroom every single day and help those students make a decision to do something that they probably really didn't want to do, but it was in their best interest. And I started to understand that that's really all we're doing is we're helping people make decisions. We're not actually selling a thing. And that's where I really got interested in to the psychology of all of it and what it's really all about, helping people make decisions.
I was going to ask you a question that you probably just answered there, but curious for you to expound on. I mean, what are the most common misconceptions you see entrepreneurs have, though, about sales psychology, Nicole?
I think it's that they need to sell something. And I know that that might sound a little crazy coming from somebody who claims to be a sales coach, but I think when we really look at it, it's about helping people make buying decisions. And in order to help people make buying decisions, we have to know why they want to make the decision. And so too many people, I think, are selling things instead of taking the time to slow down, stay curious, and understand what that person's motivation is for doing what you want them to do. And your product is really just the next step once you help them understand that a decision is what they want to make.
Well, and there's a connection to that decision, like any buying decision, I'll call it that, like whether you're at the store or you're online or whatever, there's an emotional aspect to it that builds into the psychology ultimately of how you make that decision. But you do have to come to terms with that the decision needs to be made first. And I think that's really what you're leaning into is like you as a sales coach, as an individual, you're helping people create that space to allow them to get to a point where they're like, this is a decision I need to make. And here are the elements as to how I'm going to process that decision-making capability.
That's exactly it, because nobody wants to be sold to.
Great.
But everybody loves to buy
Oh, yeah.
when we feel like it's our decision.
Correct.
And so therein is the psychology of how do we have a conversation and help somebody arrive at that realization that that's a decision that they want to make.
So when you think about applying this on a broader kind of cultural, winning through culture is all about how to build a winning culture in an organization. And obviously a performance-based culture is a big part of that. And clearly a sales environment, what we're really talking about is influencing people, helping people make decisions. What do you see, Nicole, as the key characteristics of a high-performance culture?
Well, people don't do what we say. They do what we do. So I think one of the most important things we can do for leading people is understand that leading ourselves is one of the best ways to model what we expect of others. And if you're leading a group of people that you expect certain results from and certain performance from, be interested in them. Find out what their motivation is for doing what they're doing, for creating the results that you're hoping that they're going to create. And it's no different than selling anything, right? What's the motivation? What's the reason that somebody wants to show up and do a good job at work? Yes, the paycheck, but I heard Tony Robbins say it once. He said, nobody actually wants money. It's just a bunch of dead presidents on pieces of paper. What is it that they actually want? So I think when you're leading people, it's finding out what's their motivation. Why are they showing up every day? Why do they get out of bed? And understanding what their reason is really important to help guide them, motivate them, and lead them to the results that you want them to create.
When you're working with leaders who you're coaching, right? So being a sales coach in and of itself, what do you find that they're consistently kind of coming to terms with as they're working to build a performance-based culture and still balancing the influence of somebody with the emotional well-being of that person as well? Does that make sense?
So how do they balance the emotional well-being while also supporting the person to create results?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yeah, that's the question. So like, how do you see that come in your coaching?
I think it needs to be human first, strategy second. So I think just like in any relationship, we really want to connect with people. So again, if you're a leader and you're leading, a group of people, you want to make sure that they feel supported. You want to feel that they are fully resourced and that they aren't under pressure where they don't feel like they have your support, like they can go to you to help them create those results. So I think first and foremost, it's again, going back to self-leadership. Do they understand how to take care of themselves so that they can show up and be the best version of themselves? And is that supported by you as the leader for them to take care of themselves?
Nicole, the topic of self-leadership is one of my favorites. Who has influenced you in that area?
My dad, for sure, the first and probably throughout my life, most influential. And it reminds me of the story when I was in sixth grade. My dad was a basketball coach and he was not my team coach, but he was like my private coach, essentially. And when I was in sixth grade, I told him that we were in the gym practicing and he was rebounding for me. And I said, I'm going to get a scholarship to college. I was in sixth grade, right? So it seemed like a really cool thing to say. He said, I don't know if you know how hard that is. And I said, I'm going to do it, Dad. And he said, do you know how much work it takes? So we had this whole conversation, right? And he'd been a coach forever. He'd played basketball in college. And he made me a promise right then and there. He said, if you get a scholarship to college, I will get you whatever car you want. That will be your gift from me once you get that scholarship.
That motivation.
Exactly. Back to the motivation thing, right? And so, the scholarship was cool, but that was also something that I knew whatever he wanted me to get. And the car is what I wanted to get. And he helped me design this workout that every single day I did from that point in sixth grade until I got the scholarship as a senior in high school. It was a 45-minute workout. There were a lot of days that I didn't want to do it. There were a lot of days where my friends were all going to the pool. And that workout, whenever I did it, it just was my role and my responsibility to get that in every single day. And that was one of my first real lessons in self-leadership because I had to still make that decision every day to do the workout, right? Although he was always there to help me, to rebound for me whenever I wanted it. He was going to be there for me. I still had to make the decision. And I got the scholarship. I got the car. It was a pretty cool story how that came to be. And I never forgot that, like, applying myself over that amount of time, he's right, it wasn't easy. It took a lot of dedication. It took a lot of commitment. And it wasn't something you could just snap your fingers for. And there was somebody else a few years ago that made just had a big impact on me. He was my therapist. And I remember him saying once that you can only take people as far as you've gone yourself. And that made me look at self-leadership in a whole new way, because if I'm really looking to guide and lead people, then I have to be the first. I have to really, in order to lead people, it goes back to, they don't do what we say, they do what we do.
Well, I have to ask now, what was the car?
Yeah.
It was a bright green. You guys, I was so obsessed with this bright green color. Honda Civic Del Sol. It was this little 2-seater convertible. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to drive on that college campus and, ride around in my little convertible. And yeah, it was cool.
Again, a little insight into your own psychology, right?
Well, I have to I'll share this because you guys will probably laugh. So I ended up getting an academic scholarship.
It's still a scholarship.
Yeah.
Okay. So my brain, though, when I was in 6th grade, my little 6th grade brain heard that in order to get the car, it was a basketball scholarship. So I did get recruited by my basketball coach. He gave me a scholarship. And then he called like 2 weeks later and he said, hey, I was looking over your transcripts. Your grades are really good. You actually qualify to take this academic scholarship competition. And I said, oh, I'm good. I'll take the basketball scholarship. Okay. So I get off the phone and my parents are like, what did your coach say? And I said, oh, he said there's some academic competition for a scholarship that I don't know, I qualify for. But I told him I don't want that one, or I want the athletic scholarship. And my parents are like jaws on the ground. And my dad goes, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, I don't want that scholarship. I want the bat.
I want the car.
And he goes, a scholarship. I said, Dad, I want the car. He goes, I don't care what scholarship it is. He goes, call your coach back. So it was really funny because I had one idea in my mind, but I called back. I went and took the competition and I won. And what my dad told me in that moment, he said, listen, you'll be a better teammate because if you go get that academic scholarship, your coach can go recruit another player and then you'll have an even stronger team. And then I was like, oh, okay. And I'll still get the car, right? Yes, you'll still get the car. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing the story too, because I think that's in building any kind of culture, leadership sets the tone, and the importance of self-leadership is often overlooked. As you were told, it's hard to go where you haven't been and take other people there. You got to go there first. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, and you talked a little bit about being competitive in your own way, in the sense of making sure you were able to get that basketball scholarship. And I think a lot of times we think from a sales performance, it's attracting the right talent ultimately for the functional position that they have inside your organization as a leader. Or if you're looking at it as an entrepreneur, you're looking at attracting clients to ultimately support the business, the 30, 60, 90 day that you're talking about, to support that business plan, that dream that you have. So I would be interested in your sales coach capacity. What strategies have you found to be most effective when attracting clients into a competitive market?
You know what's interesting? When I started my sales career, it was all about that competitive drive that's in me is really what created my success initially. And what I've learned in the now decade plus of being in sales is I'm never going to let that competitive drive go. That's always going to be a part of who I am. But it's really about slowing things down, and that speeds things up. And I see competition differently, I feel, than I did when I was an athlete. And to me, that's one of the ways that we set ourselves apart as sales leaders is we're willing to slow things down. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? Like people don't want to be sold to, but they want to make a buying decision. And I think the way that we stand out in a really competitive market is we're willing to slow things down. I use this phrase a lot. We're not trying to get married on the first date. And I think too many sales professionals are doing exactly that. They're going after their target. They're going after their goal. They're making it about them. They're making it about what they want. And it feels salesy and it feels pushy. And it feels like every other person out there is doing the same thing. And I think if we really want to stand out, we slow things down. We act interested in the people that we're looking to connect with. We find what their motivation is, what's important to them. And we're willing to have appetizers. We're willing to have a couple of courses before we go right in for the kill. And to me, that is one way to really stand out from other people who are doing similar things as us. And it feels good to the other person because they feel taken care of. They feel seen and heard. And there's this button that I call the show me that you know me button, Once we can hit that, that's where we start to develop trust. When the other person that we're communicating with and connecting with really feels like we know them, we get them, we understand them, that's how we stand out in a competitive market.
Power human connection.
So true.
Yeah. Often overlooked in a high performance culture. So kind of expounding on that a little bit, Nicole, I mean, obviously teams are a big part of most workplace environments today. Leaders are not just leading individuals, they're leading groups of individuals specifically towards a goal or some type of outcome. But, what are some of the frameworks you coach to for leaders that are managing teams, helping people in their sales endeavors and their performance metrics?
One of my favorites is something I call the 5-step dance. This is actually from my work as an Exactly What to Say certified guide. And the 5-step dance really is how to go from conversation to opportunity where people take action. And it's really simple. We start with questions because questions lead to conversations. And when we have better conversations, that starts to build rapport and relationships. And from those relationships, once we get to know someone and they start to trust us and they feel that connection, then opportunities start to come up, start to reveal themselves. And those opportunities are where people take action. So it's questions lead to conversations. Conversations build relationships. Relationships create opportunities. And opportunities are where people can take action. And if we follow that 5-step dance on repeat, then we're always asking better questions to get ourselves into better conversations that create better relationships. And those opportunities start to reveal themselves through the relationships that we're in. And it makes it a lot easier for people to take action and move forward.
What do you see in doing the dance? I'm a terrible dancer, but I get the visual very good. In doing the dance, how do you see that helping a team perform at a higher level?
Well, again, I think leading by example is the most powerful way we can do it. And when you're leading a team, are you staying curious and asking questions? Or are you giving out orders and demands? Because when we ask better questions, we get into better conversations. We understand the drivers for those people that are on our team that, again, we're expecting results from. And when you have a stronger relationship that's based on true connection, not based on force and pressure, I mean, we can lead by force. I just don't think that it really gives us the buy-in that we're looking for, the connection that we're looking for, the rapport building that really makes a difference in the culture. So if you have a team and you really want them to feel excited about showing up, get their buy-in through acting interested in them. And that starts by asking better questions that lead to better conversations, that build relationships, and then opportunities that come from there for people to take action. So I think whether it's in a sales process or you're leading a team and looking to lead them from a stronger perspective, I think using that is really effective in creating that connection with people.
One thing I think might be interesting to expand upon a little bit is how do you resource asking better questions? So maybe somebody's stuck in this loop and they are doing the dance, but they're getting the same result, right? So the whole definition of insanity. But what would you say? How would you articulate to somebody who wants to step into that space, wants to ask better questions, is already curious, but just doesn't have the resource to figure out how to do it? What would you say to that leader, to that person?
Well, you said the word that I would have brought up first, which is curiosity. And I think when we really focus on, it's so hard for us, you guys, it really is. Curiosity is harder than we think. It's a nice, fancy, fun phrase, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. But when we actually try to do it, we find out how much more of an advice monster we are. And we all go into advice monster mode, and it comes from a good place, right? Like, I don't want to make it sound like, yeah, I say advice monster, but it comes from a good place. We want to help people. And sometimes we think that telling them what to do or giving them advice is the best way to do that. And when we focus on staying curious, and like I said, it can be challenging. One of the things I do with my clients is I make them have a 24-hour curiosity day. Like, you can't give any advice for an entire day. And people start to realize very quickly how difficult that is.
Yeah.
I had a client, for one of the first times I did it a couple of years ago, she was like, I didn't even make it 2 minutes. My son asked me a question and I told him exactly what to do.
Yeah. I was just like recalling a situation I had this morning where I probably should have asked, I should have implored that. I should have had a 24-hour instead of just giving the advice. Yeah, solid.
Yep. And it's hard. And one of the things again, if we were to look at another framework, one of the things that I tell people is when you feel like you're at a place that you're ready to give advice, go 3 more questions deeper. And it has to come from curiosity because you asked like how we can resource that, right? Like some people are like, what's the script? What do I say? What are the exact questions that I ask?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like it's really coming from curiosity. That sounds like you're coming from certainty and you've got a list of things that you know you're going to ask and you're not really listening to the other person. And I think a lot of people go wrong because they forget that listening is communication. It's probably the most overlooked part of communication. And if we aren't really listening to what the other person is saying, then we're not really staying curious. And our questions should come from the answers the other person gave us, not from the list that we have ready to go. That's not to say that we shouldn't prepare for our important conversations and start to write down lists of questions ahead of time that we might want to ask that might come up. However, you really just need one good question to start with. And then if you're staying curious in the conversation, then you're listening and your curiosity will help fuel the next questions that you ask. If I were to say from a very technical, tactical standpoint, I would make sure that you have built the skill set and that you are equipping yourself with the tools and the right, questions that are very effective in helping people make decisions. So there are skills that you can build and things that you can be working on because the worst time to think about what we're going to say is the moment we're saying it. So we don't want to wait until the moment. Do the work before the work and make sure that you are visiting good questions to ask, good questions that you can use. And I think the other thing is to really resource ourselves is stop using real play as your role play. Too many people in the moment are using things for the very first time. Well, give yourself some practice. Like, again, if we were to go back to basketball, we didn't show up for the first game hoping it went well. We had some scrimmages. We had some practices. We had some things that we went through. We want to do that for our important conversations. Are we giving ourselves opportunities to do role play and practice some of these things that we're coming up with that we think could be effective versus doing it for the first time in a real important conversation?
Nicole, you were talking about something that I'm still back around slowing down. That can be very challenging. I mean, to your point, we get inundated as leaders with people coming at us. And I know for me, at least, it's very easy to fall into here's the answer or here's the directive because of the pressure of time and or the pressure I put on myself of time. What are some techniques to slow down?
Well, I would say curiosity, first and foremost, has to be the energy that we're entering into any conversation or any connection with. And that naturally will slow you down if you're staying curious. I think an awareness of the fact that giving answers isn't actually, maybe this example, it's coming through for me. Like if you just tell somebody all the time to not touch a hot stove, they might not, or they might. But how is it really going to set in for them? How are they? I'm not saying we just let people touch hot stoves, but ultimately, if we stay curious and we allow them to guide themselves through some of what we're looking to help support them with, then they're going to learn it in a more powerful way. So slowing down sometimes means we do have to check in with ourselves. Are we being patient? Are we staying curious? Are we allowing that person to come to the realization on their own? And I think, in the world that we live in, numbers, metrics, KPIs, like it's important to move quickly and, go, always be selling. It doesn't always have the impact that we want it to have. And when we slow things down, it actually does speed things up.
Well, curiosity is, Amanda and I work with someone on our team who uses that very well. And I know where they learned it. And they actually start their questions with, I'm curious, as opposed to launching into this is what I think you should do conversation. So that technique in and of itself, I have definitely seen kind of slows things down.
Well, I think it also, and just kind of living in some of those examples, Tim, with that particular person that's on our team, it gives the person who you are in conversation with time to process whether the conversation that is happening or what the question is going to be coming. I feel like it actually slows that entire interaction down, which is good because I know oftentimes in a very fast-paced sales performance culture, as you said, Tim, it's like, get the answer, move on, get the answer, move on. Like you're constantly spinning. And as you said, Nicole, the kind of worst time to be processing something is like real time when you actually could have prepared just a little bit beforehand. And that question in itself, or that technique to say, I'm curious, and then share your question, allows both parties, I think, to breathe in that dialogue and slow your brain down enough to be prepared for what's about to come out.
Yeah. I am glad you said that too, Amanda. That's one of the things that I say when I'm helping people understand how to be more curious. It's curiosity gives you that little bit of space, that little bit of breathing room. And even if you just say, I'm curious, that pause right there, gives you and that other person a little bit of time instead of feeling so, hustly and pushing them through the conversation. And it also feels more genuine. We've all been on a conversation with somebody where it feels like they're reading from a script. It feels like this was all pre-planned, and you can feel it. And energetically, when we really are leaning into curiosity, the other person can feel that natural pause feels good. It gives everybody a little bit of space to breathe. And, trust isn't built overnight. It's built over time. And so when we're staying curious and we're giving pauses and we're slowing things down, that is what we're really doing. We're allowing somebody to arrive at a place that they're going to, but it feels more like their idea. Instead of pushing them into something, we're kind of pulling them or guiding them or inviting them.
It's helping them decide that they want to make that decision. It's the same, right? Going back to what we started with.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's allowing that person agency in the conversation, in the decision, in the process.
Exactly. Yep. And they feel good about the fact that they feel like it's their decision. Ultimately, it's your influence and your curiosity and your questions that are guiding them to that. But it's a lot different than if they feel like they were pushed into something or being sold something.
Well, I think the art, Nicole, is to help people discover what it is they are truly trying to accomplish and how you can facilitate them discovering that and find their way there. So self-leadership, super important. Curiosity slows things down, which I think for a crazy person like me that's going all the time, it's counterintuitive, but as we're having this discussion, I'm even reminding myself that it slows things down. What are some of the other kind of key mindsets you see in, high performance sales culture?
Well, I think a lot of people try to embellish yes, meaning they're still selling something and they're trying to make what they're selling look really good. And it is good, right? But it seems like a nice to have to the person that you're talking to until you've destroyed the option of no. So I think the mindset shift is, how can we help somebody realize that regardless of what we sell, that where they are is no longer where they want to be. We need to give them a reason to move, because people will always work far harder to avoid pain than they will to move towards pleasure. So the mindset shift we need to make in a sales role is, let me ask questions and stay curious long enough to help them realize pain awareness, whatever pain there is that they are in. And the reason a lot of people just stay where they are is there is no problem awareness. There is no pain awareness. They're fine where they are. So what you're selling them looks like a nice to have. But what we've got to do is really destroy staying where they are as an option. And when we understand that destroying that as an option is actually what moves them towards the solution that we have, then we're creating that motivation that somebody has to move. And I often say, regardless of who I'm coaching or working with, I'm like, people don't want to buy your stuff. It's never a popular statement that I make, but it's true. Regardless of nobody wants to buy your stuff. They want to buy your stuff because. And if we don't stay curious for long enough and find out what that because is, then we are embellishing yes. And it just looks like a nice to have.
So Amanda and I got a quick lunch before our recording today, and someone came up to me.
Knew you were going to tell this story. And if you weren't, I was going to ask you to. So on the same page.
I can't resist.
I know.
I want to be polite about it. This is the second time this has happened to me with this individual. So they obviously don't remember me, which is fine, but they remember the clothes I wear. And the line was, "Oh, that's an amazing jacket you have. I'm sure that's custom made." And of course, I was like in line with Amanda getting our lunch. I was like, huh? What? I was like, no, it's Peter Millar. But I knew it was coming next because this person had already done this with me once before a couple months ago, which is, well, I, in the business of outfitting people like you, can I have your card? Which I actually legitimately don't carry a card. I probably should get some printed.
You have a digital card that you carry for appropriate
I have a
situations.
digital card, but it struck me. I mean, they were doing their job, which I get. They were actually with their manager. They had already kind of tried to troll our hall once, playing that they were lost, which they forgot about seeing me earlier today. So
I missed that part.
yeah, and I guess I'm listening to you, Nicole, and it's kind of flooding back to me that, and this is a establishment I used to purchase things from, but in the post-COVID world, I don't wear as many of those articles of clothing as I used to. And so it just struck me as, I think your comment there is spot on, which is, and again, that's certainly one way to prospect. I don't fault them for doing that. That's admire the courage to walk up to a stranger or semi-stranger. But
He's in the middle of a conversation and lying too.
yeah, well, we were in the middle of a conversation. You and I were. Yeah.
Wow. And so he interrupted you. Thought he thinks you're a stranger. You know him, or I guess
I had seen him before. Yeah, this was the second time, probably in the last 3 months.
But I think the point is, right, is that you didn't want to buy what that person is selling.
No, I was not in line in the middle of a conversation with Amanda with a 20-minute break for a scarf down food. I was not in the mood to buy expensive clothing. No.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and also with that approach, is he also and I wasn't there for the conversation, but is he trying to imply in some way that the clothes you have aren't something you're happy with?
No, that was definitely, it was more like, oh, well, that's such nice stuff. I'm sure you want to buy more nice stuff.
And you do have good taste. Yeah, I would say being an observer of that conversation and of that interaction, I definitely felt there was an element where, so going back to your dance, right? There was just that element missing of acknowledging what the motivation might be for that person, maybe misrepresenting the fact that because Tim has on this jacket, this outfit, that he would be so inclined, but missing the knowledge that his professional life at this point, post-COVID, which Tim acknowledged, he doesn't wear those articles of clothing nearly as much. So,
don't wear towels anymore.
Correct. So to lean into that did the opposite effect for him in that scenario versus just building a connection. For me personally, I would have appreciated it, like being transparent, like, that's a really nice jacket. I do X. Would you be interested in having a conversation with me?
That would have been a better sales pitch, so to speak.
To you in that scenario.
Well, in the moment, yeah.
Yes.
Which is really all you want, right? Like as a next, I mean, I think that's, if we were to go back to where I think a lot of sales professionals go wrong, getting married on the first date, it's like, can we focus on what's just the next step that gets that person into a further conversation with me? Even if it's not a step around, hey, I've got this jacket that you might want to buy, seeing as that you like nice things, I have some other nice things for you. Is there an invite that we could get to be able to have a conversation with that person again? And that to me is progress. It's about staying in the conversation, not definitively getting what you want in that very first interaction.
Yeah, and I think that point about progress is so important because, again, if you're truly in the business of building relationships, that's a series of progressive steps versus a massively rapid transactional jump. I use that same analogy a lot. We had a situation again recently in our working world where somebody was having a conversation with another member of our team about a position in the firm, and the person went like 3 steps ahead of the position we were talking to them about. And it was just kind of like, whoa, that's not what we're here to talk about. They were clearly selling themselves, which, kind of kudos to them. But and I had specifically set up this meeting. I said, to the person that was interviewing, your role is to, get to know the person. That's all I want you to do. It's a relationship building step. So I think that progress of steps is critically important. And often, too many times, people jump right into the marriage proposal, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, and oftentimes you'll engage with a nice person. In this instance, we're talking about earlier, nice person being Tim, who doesn't just want to say, no, I'm in another conversation. This isn't the right time. Who at least sticks in and say, I appreciate you acknowledging my jacket. I already have so many, or I'm good, or whatever that is, right? So going back to your point, Nicole, right, of a no is a no, or a yes is a yes towards progress. And I think that that's really important that you ask the right questions. So we're kind of coming back around to it. It's really being self-aware, having the acknowledgement of being curious, I really loved how you said going 3 questions deeper. So if you kind of get to that point and you're like, okay, go 3 questions deeper, that's something I'm going to start employing myself. And then ultimately at the end of it is that having the opportunity to build those relational connections. Like, don't allow, just a step in progress make you feel like you're not being successful.
Right. You can create different levels of success. And I think you wrap that all up perfectly. And that's the only thing that I'll add to that is too many people make it very black and white, right and wrong, black and white, client or no client. And I just feel like that's very defeating. And if we build in different levels of success that we can approach conversations with, then we walk away successful no matter what. Because even if your bottom level of success is just an invite to a further conversation, then you're, like Tim said, then you're moving things along. You're making progress.
So we put your bio in the show notes, but where can listeners connect with you about your coaching programs, Nicole?
I am very active on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if anyone's listening and they want to send me a DM and let me know what they'll do differently as a result of listening to this conversation, I would love to hear it.
All right. We'll definitely put those links in our show notes as well.
Well, Nicole, thank you so much for spending just a little bit of time and sharing some insights into human behavior, sales psychology, and how ultimately individuals can make one step further towards the progress that they're looking to seek. So thanks again for being with us.
Great being with you.
Thank you for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Until next time, stay intentional, be impactful,
because your culture matters.